Hey, what's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? This is Jeff from BKJ Mag TV, and this is the BKJ Mag Experience podcast. And this is very interesting. 49 episodes. This is my 49th episode. It's been a journey thus far. It's just building these episodes, getting these episodes out there. It's interesting for the listeners that's been listening. I want to say thank you so much because it means a lot. Just going in there and just recording these episodes. I mean, it's pretty tough. Everybody's starting a podcast, and it depends on what type of content you're promoting out here. These podcast episodes has been a little close to home. Writing them, producing them, getting them out there. It's been tough. It's been tough. It's never easy sitting there and just coming up with a podcast. What to talk about. My goal for the next group of podcasts basically is to be more informative and to really give useful advice in terms of what's going on out here in our communities and whatnot, so that way everybody could go in and take advantage of it. Social issue, more cultural based stuff, like we're really making sure it gets promoted out there, getting the narrative out there. And that's what it is. The power in media, the power of the voice, getting it out there, getting people to listen and to utilize. That's the goal going forward. And with no further ado, episode 49 is based on the whipping Peter. So people want to know, what does that mean? Basically, Whip Peter is the true brutal story of a slave who inspired the movie Emancipation, which starred Will Smith for the Apple TV movie. Now, I was fortunate enough to go to theaters. I went to 14th Street Union Square to go watch the movie. I used one of my passes and I was able to get in. Now, when I got into 14th Street, I gotta tell you, theater looks immaculate. It looks extremely beautiful. It looks very futuristic. It's something that you gotta go to and watch a movie there. I would highly recommend it. When I got there, it was a good audience. It was a good audience that sat in the theater. So I took my seat all the way to the back. And as the movie rolled, the movie Emancipation played. Now, the story, which basically inspired it, was basically two slaves that were enslaved in Louisiana during the heights of the Civil War. It was before Lincoln had released his Emancipation Proclamation, so these two gentlemen were enslaved. And little that we know is we don't know much about their story. It's just based on eyewitness accounts and people writing in their journals at that time describing these two former enslaved Africans. So the story in the article is by Tom Forty, and let's go in and let's see what he writes. He starts with, in 1863, the New York-based Harper's Weekly newspaper published a special 4th of July edition. Inside was an image known as the scourge back, an illustration of an escaped slave, identified in Harper's Weekly article as Gordon, but also commonly called Whipped Peter. The man with his back to the camera showed a mass of sickening scars, the result, according to the article, of a severe whooping on the previous Christmas night. The illustration was based on a real photograph which was widely circulated at what proved a critical moment in the American Civil War. The man in the paragraph is now the basis for the new Will Smith film, Emancipation, in which Smith plays the escaped slave Peter. Smith has resisted similar roles before. He declined the lead in Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained. The scourged back photo, however, represents a hugely significant story. Essentially, Will Smith did not want to do roles like these. He more found himself as a contemporary actor that really, I guess in a sense, enhanced the value of the blackface in American cinema, the image of the black man in American cinema, the smartness, the voice of the black man in American cinema. So he, in a sense, for him, he stayed away from roles like these, the slave role, which a lot of people of color, African Americans, and have come out venomously about against. Basically, they don't like the enslavement movies because it makes them angry. It creates an emotion like, wow, how this is how bad it was, and our people couldn't do anything about it. But I always say, when you watch a movie like that, it's more like you learn from it, and you learn because a part of it still exists today. The only difference is we're just not getting whipped, but we're getting whipped in a different way. Psychologically, we're getting whipped. Economically, we're getting whipped. Where people of color, particularly black men and black families on the lower echelon of the financial structure, economic financial structure, are forced to live in dirty, low-end homes where ceilings are always falling down, the boilers never work, and the slimy slumlords who own these buildings are just hoarding those residents' money away. And because of that, it makes it feel 10 times worse as being whipped. Some people may disagree with me on that one, but in a sense, it's just torture and pain having to deal with that onslaught of everyday reality. And this, in a sense, is what an enslaved African American had to deal with at that time period. It's just the brutality. And, it's like you watch it just to learn to see how to better maneuver the system today. The photo is important because it depicts the horror of slavery in a very visceral way, said David Selnick, an American history lecturer at the University of Edinburgh. It demonstrated quite clearly that slavery was brutal as the abolitionists said it was. More than 150 years on, the image of a scourged back remains immensely powerful, a defining, ubiquitous, frightening image from U.S. slavery. If you go back to the 19th century, you cannot escape that image, says Mary Mitchell, a history professor at the University of New Orleans. One of Mitchell's research interests is imagery from slavery and emancipation, and how these images are used and circulated online today. The scourged back image has become a thumbnail for slavery, says Mitchell. But when the image comes into play, it raises these ethical issues that are hard to sort out because the image itself has such a powerful presence. Yes, images have powerful presence because it's the truth. Like anybody has ever told you, a picture is worth 100 words, a video is worth 1,000 words. As you talk about it, you could talk about a topic or a subject as many times as you want. That person could do that as many times as he or she want. But the thing is, when you see that picture, when you see that video, it becomes more poignant. It grabs the reader harder. It makes the reader pay attention more. It makes the person watching the video more entrenched in the imagery. When you see an enslaved African American and you see the scars on his back, it just lets you know, like, wow, this was extreme. This system, this brutality, slavery system was so bad. And there were slave masters who didn't care. Their idea was, let's teach them a lesson, let's whoop them. And people didn't realize that was just the tip of the iceberg in terms of enslaved Africans being whipped on a daily basis in the plantations. If enslaved Africans got out of line, they would be hung until death on trees in the plantation fields. They would be attacked by dogs, set on fire. It was brutal. It was extremely, extremely brutal what former enslaved Africans had to go through during the times of before antebellum and during the Civil War and going into Reconstruction. It was extremely, extremely dreadful. And it's these types of things, these types of images that we see in the history books that really makes us angry, because this generation wouldn't stand for it. They wouldn't stand for it no more. But the thing is, as we wouldn't stand for it, are we really looking at it from their perspective? Would we, knowing this information, could we do something? We have done something at that time period that our ancestors did not do? That's the question I ask. Yeah. Indeed, the image of Gordon whipped Peter remained so powerful that the producer of Emancipation, Joey McFarlane, caused some controversy when he brought the photo, a copy from 1863, to the U.S. premiere last week and showed it on the red carpet. McFarlane has since issued an apology on Instagram. My intent was to honor this remarkable man and to remind the general public that his image not only brought about change in 1863, but still resonates and promotes change today, wrote McFarlane. He explained that during research for Emancipation, he had discovered various photographs of overlooked and historically important individuals whose stories also needed to be told. His plan is to donate the photographs to appropriate institutions. He apologized because he brought the photo to the premiere. I understood why he brought the photo to the premiere. He wanted to bring America into the consciousness of this enslaved African who was brutally beaten by slave masters in Baton Rouge in the early 1860s. He wanted to bring attention to that, to his story, because many times American history does not give acknowledgement to these former slave stories. They only focus on certain historical black figures, but stories like Peter whipped Peter doesn't even get the mention of day in the history classes. So because of that, he brought it in during the premiere. But in a sense, I think maybe it was a racial thing, because it's a white man bringing a picture of a whipped black man in front of a premiere with the protagonist of the story being black. Maybe it was a racial. Maybe it could have been a racial issue, and eventually he apologized for it, because maybe it was in poor taste. It's a wild concept, wild idea at most. The original Harper's Weekly article, penned by an anonymous writer, was titled "A Typical Negro." It told Gordon's story. He escaped from his master in Mississippi and raced for days and nights through swamps and bayous, pursued by his master, their neighbors, and a pack of bloodhounds. Emerging from creeks and swamps, he threw the bloodhounds off the scent by rubbing his body with onions taken from the plantation. Gordon displayed unusual intelligence and energy. According to the article, he arrived at Baton Rouge with his clothes torn, covered in mud and dirt. It also described how he acted as a guide for Union troops in Louisiana, but was captured and beaten by Confederates. Gordon escaped once again and made it to the Union lines at Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The photograph, which was credited to McPherson and Oliver, was apparently taken as part of a surgical examination which Gordon underwent before enlisting into the Union Army. To be honest with you, the idea of slavery in the United States was a brutal institution, and we're still waiting for reparations. We are still waiting for it. What Peter had to endure in order to gain freedom, to get his family back, is legendary. What many enslaved Africans had to do in order to get their freedom was extraordinary. A lot of these men enlisted in the Civil War because they knew they were fighting for their freedom. After Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, it emboldened enslaved African Americans who were released, who were freed upon when Union armies entered southern states and territories. and they were told to join the army. When they joined the army, they just fought and they fought and they fought because they were fighting. They were fighting not just for themselves, but they were fighting to end an institution of repugnant, racist slavery, which had encompassed the entire black race in all of the South. So overall, we remember what Peter did. We remember his sacrifices, and we thank Will Smith and Mr. McFarlane for acknowledging his story on the big screen and on the Apple TV platform. It's an interesting story. It's an interesting movie. I think it would have been better had not Will Smith played the role of Peter, but an unknown Haitian actor from a fine acting school. I think the movie would have been scored a lot better. I think the fact that Will Smith starred in the movie and coming off the Oscar debacle with Chris Rock, I think is what brought down the movie in a sense. So it should have been, because Will Smith talking in a Haitian Creole accent was just, no, it wasn't it. It was not it at all. So to let everybody know, Peter was Haitian, and he lived in Louisiana, and he went through all that track in order to gain his freedom to get to his family. He wanted to make sure he got the Union Army, came back, and got his family. That was the order of events. But overall, it's what the fight for freedom stands for within people of color in the black community. You know, we fight and we fight, and that's what drives us. No matter what, we fight. And Peter did not stop fighting. Overall, I felt like they should have focused more on the back a lot. In fact, they only showed it as a prop in the end, and that was it. And it just we showed the brutality what Peter had to go through, but the image of the back, in a sense, should have been more displayed throughout the movie. You know, showing his back in the beginning, just trying to showcase why the audience should fall for such the story of his back with Peter. But overall, I enjoyed the movie because it showed a sense of courage and a surge of determination, fearlessness, and goals to achieve the inevitable, which is freedom and return to family. God rest Peter's soul. Thank you for the movie Emancipation by Mr. Farouk, by director Farouk, and Will Smith starring in the movie. McFarlane, thank you for producing the movie as well and bringing us an awareness with Peter. Overall, Peter, thank you for your story of never giving up and getting to the road of freedom. We'll remember your story. Thank you for listening to this episode 49 of BKJ Max Podcast. Peace, love, always one.